There's a lot of chatter about Minneapolis these days, especially when it comes to abolishing the police department and how that's affecting the housing market. In this video, I'm going to show you the data that paints a clearer picture for you right after this. Welcome to Minneapolis Living. I'm Nick Sundahl with Acta Homes of Keller Williams Classic Realty Northwest. Before I get into that data, a little bit of a deep dive for you today. I would love it if you pound that subscribe button when you're there. Ring the bell, that way you're alerted every time I upload new content each week. As most of you know, a couple of months ago, the tragic loss of George Floyd led to mass protests throughout the Twin Cities as well as the nation. And here in Minneapolis, that led to calls for abolishing the Minneapolis Police Department. Now, I'm not here to talk about abolishing the police, what that means for the residents of Minneapolis, or any of that. What I would like to address is the statements that I get not only on my channel, but that I've seen in news outlets, whether it's online, and that's how nobody's going to live in Minneapolis anymore because it's not safe, or all the people are moving out of Minneapolis. And that's where the data might tell a little bit different story. So let's dive right into it. This is a white paper written by the Minneapolis Area Association of Realtors, and they did a little bit more of a deep dive than, frankly, I have the patience nor the knowledge to do. So when I read things like this, I really take it to heart. And this was written, like I said, by the area realtors, and all the data was drawn from North Star MLS, which, by the way, is one of the industry leaders in the entire nation when it comes to data collection on the housing markets, and it's incredibly accurate. So this is a message from the president, Linda Rogers, and I won't dive into this one too much except for the second to last paragraph, stating, since Mr. Floyd's death, there have been several misleading claims and opinions on various social media platforms asserting that Minneapolis residents are fleeing the city. Too often, particularly nowadays, opinions are accepted as hard facts. To assess the veracity of these claims, it is important to conduct an analysis of the data that could either confirm or disprove the speculation. Sorry, didn't mean to scare you with the close-up, but there are 3 terms that you should know, and I'm going to give you the definitions for them right here, because they're incredibly important. 1, redlining. You may have heard of it. Redlining comes from the lender's point of view. And this was a prominent practice back in the 50s, 60s, probably even in the 70s, but it's when a lender draws a red line around a particular neighborhood or pocket market within a greater area that basically represents more risk in the housing. So this happened predominantly in certain neighborhoods of Minneapolis, and people who wanted to buy those properties paid higher interest rates, they had more fees, and thus they were at a disadvantage when they bought those properties and in the long-term value of them. The second one comes from, well, my industry, the realtors, and that's steering. And steering is something that a realtor can do by guiding a client into a neighborhood that the realtor thinks is, quote, better. It doesn't necessarily make it better. We're not here to tell you where to live. We're here to give you the information and whether that property is a good value or not. So if you're a realtor, or if you hear about realtors guiding somebody into a neighborhood that they suggest, that could be misconstrued as steering. And the third one, and the one I've seen and heard the most often since essentially this past Memorial Weekend, is blockbusting. And that's people within our industry, whether that's lenders, title, or even realtors, that tell you that a particular market, a submarket, is going to feel some point of economic pain, namely housing prices are going to drop because of a certain situation. It's a scare tactic. So to manipulate a market like that by doing or giving a scare tactic is not only illegal, it's highly unethical. So if you see it, report it. You can even tell me and I will report it. But blockbusting is something that I'm seeing going on right now, and it is absolutely abhorrent. To dive deep into it, they used 4 different indicators which include new listings, percent of original list price received, days on market, and showings. And they compared them with other markets around the Twin Cities, namely larger communities that hold up in terms of overall housing to Minneapolis in general. So if you want to get into it, let's start with change in new listings. There was a statement saying that a quarter of all listings in Minneapolis had come on since the murder of George Floyd and the unrest of protests and riots. Well, that is actually true. 22 or 23% of those listings did come on in that time. However, another 25% of those listings happened right before it. So you could make that assumption that the majority of the listings happened because of the late housing market start, which COVID essentially shut down in mid-March, and things didn't really start opening up until mid-May. As you can see, there's not really a big difference between Minneapolis and St. Paul, specifically since Minneapolis is the bigger of the two cities. And if you look at the diagram here from late May, when we had a drop-off, which is typically coincides with Memorial Weekend, it's coincidentally when the murder of George Floyd happened. So these new listings hadn't really changed all them that much, and frankly, they started to drop as you went later into June. If people were actually fleeing the city, you'd probably see more and more listings come on. As you can see, Minneapolis does not show a surge or even a significant increase in seller activity compared to St. Paul and other metro cities. Weekly new listings. So another way to assess changes in market activity across different cities is to index the data to the starting period and then track it over a cumulative change over time. So a value of 150 represents a 50% increase from the first week of the year. So here, where they started in January and started each of these communities off at the same spot and then based their change from that starting point. So there are several noted events that have impacted those numbers, but it appears Bloomington, Brooklyn Park, and St. Louis Park are each more of an outlier than Minneapolis and St. Paul. So as you can see, and the dark line being Minneapolis, things moved along as normal in the whole Twin Cities as we moved up into about March. And that's, of course, when the shutdown happened, not only here in the state, but COVID taking hold over the country, and things dropped dramatically. As you can see, the initial COVID impact, which just completely took out new listings across the Twin Cities. And then these obviously gently climbed through May. Everything fell right around Memorial Day, as it typically does, climbed back up throughout June, and then fell on July 4th. So, as you can see, Minneapolis is nowhere really near different outside of the other Twin Cities communities, the suburbs. Now, it did have probably a little bit, because of what was going on in the city, it had a longer delay in getting new listings, but new listings climbed at a commensurate rate. If we move based on monthly instead of weekly numbers, new listings in Minneapolis fell 4.2% in June. For comparison, St. Paul saw a 6.4% decline. Bloomington had a 34% decrease, and St. Louis Park showed a 6% gain. So these smaller communities, such as Golden Valley and St. Louis Park, actually had a gain in new listings, whereas Minneapolis, St. Paul, Bloomington, Eden Prairie, and Minnetonka all had year-over-year decline in new listings, which would tell you that if people were fleeing the city, you'd see an uptick in new listings year over year. Now, median days on market. Let's assume that even if we were to assume that there were more houses on the market than normal, days on market would be higher than normal, or they would be increasing. So, which means it would take longer for those homes to sell. People wouldn't just be dumping them for nothing. They would sell them at market rates. So if we look at median days on market, Minneapolis actually had a drop, which means they're selling 6% quicker than they did last year. When you compare it to the rest of the Twin Cities, whether it's St. Paul or the surrounding communities that are compared here, everybody else had longer days on market. So Minneapolis is actually selling faster, which means people are buying. Now, Minneapolis has a slightly lower price point than some of these, such as St. Louis Park, Golden Valley, Eden Prairie, and Minnetonka. These last three have much more luxury homes within their communities than others. So Minneapolis being a little bit more affordable. But even so, when you talk about comparing directly to St. Paul or even Bloomington, which is a little bit more on pace with Minneapolis, days on market are falling by comparison. Now we'll move into percent of original list price. So this is calculated by what the sale price is compared to what people list their home for. So for example, if you sell it for $300,000, or if you list it for $300,000 and you get $300,000 for that house, that's 100%. So if you look at Minneapolis compared to not only St. Paul but those other communities, it's right around 100%. Now, if there was an influx of listings or if homes were being dumped, you would consider that these would actually be going down. They'd be taking whatever they wanted to get out of the city. But it falls right in line with what each and every other community is doing within about a given percent. So 99% here in Golden Valley. Again, these percentages when it comes to Golden Valley, Eden Prairie, and Minnetonka have more luxury homes, which means, and that's a softer market here in the Twin Cities. But compared to St. Paul, Bloomington, St. Louis Park, all of which are getting right around 100%, and that's obviously a very strong market, regardless of where they're going. So all these cities are displaying similar trends, not just Minneapolis when it comes to an overall housing market. And then let's do the weekly showing activity. So weekly showing activity fell drastically during the initial COVID impact, and then again typically falls during Memorial Day. Minneapolis obviously took a significant hit when it came to showings beyond Memorial Day and into the second week, but rebounded significantly. So people were not feeling unsafe in terms of going into the city looking for homes to purchase. And then as you see, July 4th is not a good week or weekend around here because most people are taking vacations. People sell their houses for a multitude of reasons. And I'm not here to say that people are moving out of Minneapolis because of the abolishment of the PD or not, or because they feel unsafe or not. But the data suggests that we have a very strong market, not only in the Twin Cities, but Minneapolis specifically. Look, we've been in an unprecedented year here. COVID delayed our housing market significantly. Showings were down a lot. They typically go down over holidays, as you saw on Memorial Weekend and over the 4th of July. But it just delayed the market. So to point it in any one particular direction is not only unsafe, but it's plainly not true. If you have any questions about this, or if you have any comments about this, please put them below. Or you can always reach out if you're looking to buy or sell real estate here in the Twin Cities. You can call, text, email, follow me on my social media accounts, but I'd love to start that conversation with you. This is Minneapolis Living. I appreciate you watching. Please stay safe, please stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.